I love to just start it up. Good morning.
I did. Good morning.
Ching.
Clink. Cheers.
Cheers. Good butter coffee. Native root butter coffee. NativeRootCoffee.com.
Fresh from the Andes Mountain.
I'm sitting in my grandmother's rocking chair.
Yeah.
All 5 of her kids were rocked in this chair. Some of them with real rocks.
With real rocks. I think I had heard that was a kit chair. So you ordered a kit and assembled it at home.
The original American IKEA.
Yeah, probably something like that.
Americans were clever like that.
Till the others caught on.
Right. Well, here we are, a new setting.
Yeah, we're trying out new places. We wanted to be outside. But,
the frogs and the crickets.
They were too loud. Frogs and crickets. I was like, it sounds really wonderful when you're in the environment, but when you're listening to a recording, unless it's a meditation recording, which they must like balance the audio somehow, then it's softer.
I kind of like this. I'm looking up to you a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about time you look up to me.
After 22 and a half years, 22 and 3/4 years. Been married a long time.
It might be showing at this point. Who do you think looks more like whom?
Well, you're trying to look like me wearing a cowboy hat and stuff.
You think
cowgirl.
So? No, it's just because I have to do my workout yet and I still have to wash my hair.
Ah, okay. So you have a topic, right?
Well,
this is the John and Tara podcast.
Good, thank you.
John, Tara, podcast.
J, T. Is it T? I should not have even tried. I should look it up.
I like JT podcast.
We'll roll with that.
We got our own signs, gang signs, baby.
All right.
JTP gang.
So we write down ideas for podcasts as we are going along through the day. You know, maybe we're listening to another podcast, just going through life. I try to write down the topic so that when it's like, hey, what are we talking about this morning? We have something to roll with, right?
Business, life.
And several weeks ago, I remember saying, gosh, you know, it was particularly after listening to a number of these podcasts where these people in their 20s, maybe early 30s, are discussing the dating scene, right? And they're men and women are just each discussing how it's difficult, or how there just aren't quality people out there, or when they get married, you know, this is, you know, typically you hear a lot of the guys are like, this is how it's going to be, you know, if I'm making this amount of money and I'm providing this, then you'll have to be okay with me having a side chick or a mistress.
Yeah, no. Let's not go too far on that, because that is a recent phenomenon. Okay. And that is a few blustery guys that are too immature to understand that a relationship actually can bring you more than 10 women. Right. Because you're never going to get into the layers of a relationship. You don't get the fullness, the fulfillment, the quality, the depth, the deep conversations, or the partnership. Yeah. You know, the business part of a marriage, of a relationship.
And that's not at all demoting a marriage by any means by saying it's a business part. It's, I mean, when you really look at it and you're in a marriage, you realize how much of it is business-like. Yeah. So at the risk of going too far off tangent, I'm gonna...
Sure.
But I'm glad you brought that up, because that with this our podcast was already started before we were listening to, you know, these types of podcasts, but in a sense there is a bit of a response, and it's kind of like your Auntie Tara and Uncle John, you know, or Uncle John and Auntie Tara sitting with you and helping to answer some questions, because what I hear in those conversations is the young men and young women are trying to one-up each other. It's like, well, if you think you need a mistress, well, then I need this, and this needs to be. And it's like they're pre-negotiating a deal and making, a business deal, but before there's any like value.
Well, I have yet to hear a podcast where a husband is sitting next to his wife saying, since you're taken care of and I make all this money, I am going to have 2 side chicks. That podcast doesn't exist. If it does, send it to us because we'll watch it and we'll review it. But that doesn't exist. These are all single people hypothecating about their life and how they would live if they were doing that. And so what needs to be talked about is it needs to be put out to younger people that, I mean, there's not very many guys are going to be wealthy, and not very many women are going to be a side chick. It doesn't make much sense.
I think it's kind of like the reality TV world. It's so prevalent on TV, on social media, that it makes it seem like that's the norm.
Yeah, and it is not. It is not.
And I think this response, in a way, is to acknowledge that, just because you're seeing and hearing about those types of things doesn't mean that it needs to even be your norm. And what I hear is a number of these podcasters, commentators, want a traditional role type relationship, but are also kind of reconstructing it. So I'm going to hone in on what I propose this topic to be. So several weeks ago I said, gosh, women, and particularly young women, even when I was a younger woman, are between a rock and a hard place. And you're like, oh, guys are too. and I thought, okay, great, I'm going to write this down for a topic. And a lot of times we would start discussing it already, but what I mean is that you hear it in these women's voices, right? And they're and this started even, I think, before even I was a young woman, where it's like, okay, women, you now have these rights. You can do all these things. We're fighting for you to, early on it was just even have a bank account and be able to vote. But, then later it was about, having equal opportunities and so forth. So there's been an evolution of feminism, right? But then it turns into, this is what you have to do. You have to be equal and on par with a man, even if she doesn't really want to.
Well, back when when I was young, my mom stayed home. She had 2 kids, 2 boys. I'm 4 years older than my brother. And for her side income, she babysat in the neighborhood. And she would even be teased by the women who she was babysitting their children, that she doesn't have a job and she isn't working outside the home, so she's not like a real woman. And she would get teased about that stuff. And, I think it's because the women didn't want to be working. Mm-hmm. They didn't want to be dropping their kid off in the morning with another woman who gets to stay home now with their kid because that other woman feels that she has to work. And so, the number one thing I think feminism should have done is stop fighting for rights and start fighting for independence, right? For women. Independence in the sense that a woman can be whatever she wants. Men don't, unless a guy's not working. I mean, if a guy's not working, he's going to get a lot of crap from people around him, and then he's not going to hang around that group of friends anymore, because guys don't want to be around worthless men. Right? But women want to be mothers, homemakers, caretakers, because like we've seen and heard, there's more women nurses, there's more women teachers, especially of elementary children, that kind of thing. And those are caretaker roles. There's more women working in nursing homes. There's more, that type of stuff. So I think people should be able to be what they want, and they should be able to do what they want. And as far as people, if you want to negotiate having multiple partners with your main partner, like if, we're married 22 3/4 years now, anniversary in November. And if I said, oh yeah, I want a side chick, and by the way, I've had 2 for the last 10 years, I mean, for the most part, I'm assuming that would be it. Me and you wouldn't be together. And even if you would say yes, I wouldn't do that, because that's not in the nature of a mature man that loves his wife.
And particularly as something that was, I mean, you can't pre-negotiate everything before you get married, but you've got to cover the bases, right? I mean, there are people who apparently have polyamorous relationships. That might be the exception of the podcast. They might not be married, of the person who might.
I've listened to a lot of them, and you have to listen to both sides.
Yeah.
You know, because it's to a guy it sounds ideal. You know, well, I got Jolene for partying on Friday. I got Becky for Wednesday night bowling, and right. That's why I'm choosing those names.
Yeah.
You know, I got Roxanne.
Roxanne. Woo!
and then I have Tara for dinners at home and going to the park on the weekend with the kids and, you know, all this stuff. Yeah, well, you know, that's not part of a cohesive society, you know, and there's always going to be outliers. The problem is the outliers have platforms now, you know, whereas you had to go to a secret, you know, dark, dingy building in the corner of the city if you wanted to do kooky, nefarious things, you know, and I'll say it to people's faces. I don't care if you line up 7 women and 1 guy and they're like, we're all happy, you know, talk to me in 20 years. You know, talk to me when you don't have everything you wanted and it didn't work out exactly like you thought it would. And that can happen in a marriage. That can happen in life. But like I said in a previous podcast, it's hard enough when you have a great relationship and your life is going, you know, 60-70% in the direction you wanted it to. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's always little paths that end up being taken and you know, thunderstorms and earthquakes and things like that in life. But it's hard enough when it's a really great fun relationship. You do things together, you do some things separate, but you're really excited to get back together. It's not easy. Yeah. You know, and I can't even imagine maintaining I mean, you know, if a guy's got enough money to 100% support that many women, the other thing those women got to realize is they're not going to be around forever. Long term. Yeah.
Well, it goes back to our submission series, right?
Yeah.
If you even what developed out of that is to submit to your relationship first. Mm-hmm. And so if your relationship is not built on just the two of you, mm-hmm. I think innately it feels unstable, mm-hmm. right? And so how can you really submit to something that is unstable? There's this wild card factor, right? Maybe you think you're committed to your relationship, and whether it's known or unknown and there's a wild card that comes in, it's innately unstable.
Well, let's look at it this way for a second. When you propose to a woman, you make her special, right? And when you commit to a woman feels more, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, feels more secure. You know, I've got this guy, we're going to work on life together. You know, and if we look at our society, the way it's set up, there's not much in a divorce, especially if there's kids and there's family assets. There's not much for a guy, right? Like if you amicably split, let's say everything is 50-50, right down the middle, the woman can still get state assistance. The guy can't. You know, they're because if let's say the woman doesn't have a job. The guy has a job. They get 50-50 everything. The guy still has to work his job while having his kids, you know. And it's all. I heard this. So I heard somebody say the ownership of women went from men to the state. And when a guy marries a woman, that I'm not saying ownership in a terrible way. It just denotes ownership when you get married, right? And because I'm supporting you. Right? We get married, I'm supporting. You may have a job, but if I'm making most of the money, I'm supporting you. But if we get divorced, you might run to the state and say, hey, I don't make enough money to keep my lifestyle going. And that's what happens in most of the scenarios, right? And then the state takes over. And now technically you're owned by the state.
So I don't know the laws well enough to comment too much on this, but I can ask questions. So you, 30-some years ago, were a very young man, divorced with a child, and with sole custody of your child. And the judge ordered that actually she would need to pay you if you chose. I mean, she didn't enforce it, but if you wanted child support, that you could request child support, which you didn't. But I think through your conversations with men over the years, you probably have enough knowledge of how the legal system has changed, because this is eventually maybe even leading to the topic that I was going to bring up, which is I think women are between a rock and a hard place in their 20s, early 30s, and you're like, yeah, so are men. And the reason is, and this is actually a good case in point. So I, as a young woman and teenager, was basically taught these principles. You need to be able to support yourself, because if something happens in life, you need to be your own safety net, essentially. And I think that is, as a whole, is good teaching, is good advice, and good coaching from a parent, that my parents were teaching me skills, so that I would be able to live in society, hold a job, have a good relationship.
Cook dinner, do laundry, all the basics.
Yeah, and things that I just thought was normal when I became an adult and learned that people didn't even know how to cook or do basic household things. I learned how to garden as a kid, and that is very much a lost skill. It's very much being revived. But so I don't want to sound like I'm knocking the principles that I was taught in the society and the era that I grew up in. I think there are a lot of good reasons, and this is a key point, that maybe you're independent enough too that my grandma, for example. So back in the 60s, early 70s, she had 4 kids that she was supporting alone, and she would go on assistance just for periods of time when she needed help, but she was very much about supporting her family on her own.
She worked factory jobs in places where the guys didn't want her.
Blatantly.
She put up with a lot of BS, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And she would have rather had a glass ceiling to bust through than deal with harassment on the floor. And so she had a lot to contend with. And so maybe you're that type of person where you're just, you have a different mindset where you don't want to be a ward of the state, essentially. If, maybe even, God forbid, your husband dies, and maybe you're equally contributing to the household, but all of a sudden with half the income gone, maybe you don't have a good insurance policy or a no health insurance or life insurance policy. You can no longer afford your lifestyle. So let's even just take divorce out of the scenario. I think the principles of me, I'm speaking for myself, being taught you need to be able to support and even have the education. I mean, we're young and old enough to have had usually great aunts, their husband passes and they don't know how much money is where. They don't know how to do any of the banking, accounting, and if they're fortunate, maybe they have a kid or a son-in-law or someone who knows enough and can help them trustfully through this process. And so I think my generation in particular was taught from very early on to have skills, to have a mindset, to have a certain work ethic. And what seems to be happening is that the young women are like, but I do want to be a stay-at-home mom. I do want, I do see the value in being a homemaker, and it sounds like young men are as well, but there's kind of a clash, because we've had for a good couple decades the 2-car household, a bigger home, right? The starter home is already a way bigger home than a starter home of your parents' generation.
Yeah, a starter home was a rambler with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room connected to the kitchen.
Right.
And a walk-in with no entry.
And so I think our standards, there's so much about our standards that have changed. It's finding the happy medium, because we're not necessarily, even though we have traditional values, we're not necessarily saying it's got to be like it was 60 years ago. I mean, we don't even know what it was 60 years ago.
Well,
you have to evolve with the times, but there are also reasons for good, solid, traditional principles.
It's going back to that.
It seems to be. There seems to be a desire, right?
No, it's a disaster. Why it's going back to that. What people need to do is, if your lifestyle changes, you need to change your lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to, there's always a reason for divorce, right? There's always a reason that people are in a situation where now, you know, splitting, living together, splitting and having a split income. This is the way I see it. So if you live together and you have expenses, I have expenses, you have desires, I have desires, we do certain things. You know, I might have a motorcycle, you might want a Lexus, you know, what
white, of course.
A white Lexus, you know, whatever it is, right? But the expenses are split even when you're living together. Yeah. But it's more economical.
Right.
If you are now trying to support two households on that same income, and you're given 50% of the household assets in a divorce, that is such a drain on that single resource, you know.
Right.
And now it's spread thinner. The lifestyle needs to come down, you know, like, I don't know, I would say 50%, until you get a handle on what's going on and you're stabilized, right?
But notice again, the focus is on what if there's a divorce. You know, we hear so many in these podcasts, which is why we're talking about marriage and good relationships, how to have a good, lasting relationship even through the bumps. So here's an example. So we were with my aunt and uncle a couple months ago, and we were at their lake cabin, and I noticed that they had a steel roof. So I asked them, you know, how do you like the steel roof? Because you know, I actually am interested in like house stuff and like how it's built, and like, you know, is of course going to last longer, but it sounds really loud in a hailstorm. What does it do when you have Wi-Fi inside or cell signal? You know, how is it reacting? Anyways, he said the main reason that he wanted to install a steel roof was if he happens to pass before my aunt, that the roof doesn't need to be replaced. He said the last roof we replaced cost $18,000, and I don't want my wife to have to move out of our home because she can no longer replace the roof.
And that was probably quite a while ago. It'd probably be $25,000,
right.
$30,000, yeah.
Right. And so I bring that up because so many people are talking about, divorce. They're planning for a divorce, essentially. All these talks are about, you know, statistically, yes, a lot of people get divorced, but what if you planned for a long marriage?
Well, yeah, and I wasn't going that route because of that. I was saying that because of what we're hearing.
Right.
You know, and realistically, most of the people talking about it haven't been married. They're just looking at statistics. A lot of these young people are caught up on statistics. And if you're caught up on statistics, you're probably a statistic, you know. And instead of going out, living your life, doing your relationship, you know, and just being who you are. But there is, for some of these people, there's quite a bit of money in their podcast. Yeah. And that is, that's a driver. Mm-hmm. All right. And so if you find a hot topic, you keep going down that line. Now, it's also engaging because they bring in people to argue with. Yeah. And so then you get to listen to other people argue your points, and then you kind of in your mind, you think you're doing something. Yeah. And so it would be beneficial to young people to be forming relationships and going out on dates and doing fun things that they like to do. It's like I said in a podcast, you know, you take your phone and you're interested in archery, you know, or you're interested in shooting, or you're interested in BMX, and you end up downloading a game and you're BMXing in the little BMX park on your bike, and then you might get a BMX game for your Xbox or whatever, and you don't go out and BMX. You know, you're not riding the half pipe on your bike. You're not shooting the bow and arrow at the range. You know, we go biking in a mountain bike park, and there's an archery range there. So a lot of times when we're showing up to go mountain biking, there's guys unloading their trucks and getting all their gear and going to the archery range and shooting. And you know, that's life.
Do you think they're practicing aiming at us?
No, it's separate.
I know, I was just thought that would be funny.
Yeah, and an arrow only goes so far, and through the trees it'd be very difficult, you know.
Okay.
But it's there's a lot of backstops too.
Yeah.
My main point in us doing this podcast is to let people know we've been married almost 23 years. We've been together for 23 years, more than 23, and you can have a wonderful life. You can have an exciting time together. You're going to have ups and downs and hills and valleys and peaks and troughs, but it's up to you. You know, like I've said, it's up to the man to be romantic. You know, if I take all of the responsibility for romance, you know, when you put on a nice skimpy outfit and light a candle, I'm like, hey, you know, she's into it too, you know, but if I take 100% of responsibility for the romance, then there's always going to be romance, you know, there's always going to be, and that's what I do. I'm like, I mean, there's times where I'm not romantic, where I'm like, hey, hey, you know, pat, poke, you know, I'm like, there's times like that, but then there's times like, let's go out to dinner. You know, let's have a glass of wine or two or four, or a couple bottles, and then come home, you know, and have fun, you know, and that kind of thing. You know, obviously we're sober before we drive home, but you know, it's your responsibility to live your life. There are no statistics you have to live by. There are no statistics you have to live by.
You don't have to be a statistic.
Right. They're saying 50% of marriages end in divorce. Well, all marriages end in death. I mean, it's you know, 100% of marriages end. You have to be with the pointy part so you can spin it all the way around. Teaching Tara how to use the old style thermos.
Oh, I guess I had to go another 180 degrees.
Yep. It's got slots where the arrows are.
Okay, I just had to go another 180. It wasn't open enough.
Yeah. So the moral to the story is, in my mind, and we are talking about some of these podcasts because there has to be alternatives. It can't just be everybody ranting and raving about how many women guys can sleep with, and it is true. I've listened to the studies about women. You know, the more guys a woman sleeps with, the less capable she is of bonding. And it's because of a chemical that's released. And I'm not saying that women can't sleep with as many men as they want. I'm saying that you have to take the responsibility to not be a statistic. You know, you have to decide. You should understand that, you know, birth control pills change your physiology. They change the chemicals in your brain. They're going to change you so you're attracted to different things. And then when you get off of the pill, you're not attracted to those things anymore because your hormones shift. Okay? And if there is a number, and each person will be different, but if there is a number of the amount of people that you end up having sex with, and then all of a sudden your brain chemicals are different, because that's how our animal body, our instinctiveness, sees the world, you know.
Well, when you told me about this, the chemical you're talking about, neurotransmitter hormone, is oxytocin. And so it sounded really, I didn't listen or read this, but what it sounded like is the concept of addiction. So the first hit is like whatever the addiction substance is. Maybe it's alcohol or cigarettes. The first time, well, cigarettes is probably a better example, because you hear from someone who's smoked and the first time is just like amazing, and then soon after, subsequent times are still amazing.
After
but
you're done choking and coughing and
I guess,
sputtering and spitting
probably.
out the tar and the...
Obviously, I have not done that. So, but still, the effect can still be, despite that,
stimulating.
I hear a lot of times relaxing. Like there's a relaxing component, and so similarly, oxytocin, so the hormone you're talking about in listening to these or reading this study is oxytocin. So similar to addiction, the first times are going to have the most release
and
of
it's
this
a
hormone.
bonding hormone.
That's the bonding hormone. It's released in significant amounts in women in particular after sex and orgasm and after a woman gives birth. And so it stands to reason. Now this is, I'm assuming this is what the study was basically saying, is when you keep repeating that, like any substance, keep smoking, keep drinking, the effects, you need more of that stimulus, the cigarette or alcohol, for example, to heighten the result, to keep it,
to gain that chemical,
and to that degree, to that level, which is why cocaine, for example, is so tremendously addictive. It gives you such a high.
Is it? Does it?
Well, apparently.
I don't know.
I've heard. So I think it makes sense as far as why that would be. Why wouldn't it be similar for oxytocin? Because it can, unless you had really bad experiences related to bonding. For most people, that the feeling of the effect of oxytocin is comforting. It feels good.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see the logic behind if a woman has had X, and it's going to be different for each person, right? But has had X number of partners, and maybe even within a certain time frame, that it's going to disenable her capacity to bond well. All right. How's that for an explanation of a hypothesis of what I think that you
I think
read?
that it's not just about having sex, and it's not just about not getting pregnant. The narrative in our society has been whittled down to these basic, binary things, right? You're either for abortion or you're against abortion. You're either homophobic or you love gay people. And there's varying degrees of everything. We have homosexual friends, and there are some homosexuals that I wouldn't even go near. And we have white friends, and there are some white people that I wouldn't go near. And we have black friends, and there are some black people I wouldn't go near. And there's all these intermixed ranges and ratios, of how you live your life, how you do things, and so it's not a. I want young people to understand, it's not a binary. You're either getting married or you're going to have tons of partners. Or you're going to get married and you're going to have tons of partners as the man, but the woman can't. And it's like, you've got to go live the life you want to live. You've got to find a person that you get along with. And number one is someone you can talk to, someone you are happy when you see them, someone you feel good when you're talking to them, someone that uplifts you as you uplift them. Mm-hmm. There's so many more important things, and it needs to be said. I wish there was more people doing podcasts like us saying that, this is how we live our life.
Yeah.
This is the type of thing that we focus on. This is the kind of things that we do. These are the fun things that we have in our life. What are we seeing?
One of the guys is here.
No, it's not one of the guys. It's a sales guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking up a song. Keep going.
You're looking up a song?
Yeah, we're
okay.
going to have to add book suggestions and the songs that came up. So it's interesting. We're going to have to save the topic that I thought we were going to talk about for another time, I think, because I think it's turned into a great topic. How about the title, Does He Need a Mistress? Does She Need a Lexus? No. I
I'm not interested in doing pop topics.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about something that's fairly popular, so it is technically a pop topic, right? And so, but it's also part of what we've been doing for a couple of years now on our podcast. You know, we've been having talks about life, business, marriage, relationships, how to function within all of those things and how to be dynamic. I mean, we have multiple businesses. We've been married for 23 years almost, and we're very functional. We're very functional in life, in our outside relationships, friendships, business relationships, that kind of stuff. Within family, our family members that you can get along with, you know, we're very functional. And planning for the future, taking care of the present, reminiscing about the past, learning from the things we've done, learning from the things we haven't done, decisions we've made, money we've lost, money we've spent on things we go, well, maybe we shouldn't have done that, and money we've spent on things that go, man, that has brought a lot of fun and joy and excitement and even calmness, you know.
Yeah.
Putting a generator on the house, having extra fuel for the LP, for the gas, for the furnaces, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, just there are things that you can do that bring you peace of mind, and there are things you can do that, you know, you're talking about addiction. You know, you could spend a lot of money on crazy things that don't bring you peace of mind, that cause you to be all the time.
I think
so
this
did you get to where you're going?
Yeah, I think this is not only a pop topic, though. Sometimes a pop topic really is a pop topic. Like, you see everybody commenting about, you know, like Andrew Tate getting kicked off of all social media.
Or Trump,
right?
or Brandon, you know, or, you know.
Musk.
Yeah.
It's a pop topic, so everybody's trying to jump on board. But I think this is actually something that is going on. Okay, the song is "Someone to Love."
By?
Well, it's featuring Babyface. It might have been someone else might have sung it before.
Yeah.
But because before you were talking about you want someone to converse with, and you know, so the chorus is someone to love, someone to touch, someone to hold, someone to know, someone to love, someone to trust, someone to hold. Oh, someone to know.
Right.
And there are great songs out there. It starts, part of the lyrics are, I thought I'd never love again. I thought my life was over, and I didn't want to face nor even see another day. Suddenly from nowhere, baby, you appeared. You dried my tears. You cared for me. Baby, your love for me truly rescued me. It's because of you I was able to fall in love again. You give me, and then it goes into the chorus, someone to love.
Well, that one got you, huh?
Yeah. Well, we were talking in the kitchen in preparation for this, or maybe it was another time.
Well, we were chatting. You brought up a topic, and we kind of bantered a little bit about it.
But what you said, I think, fits this so well. And we were listening to a podcast even before this to kind of even still get context. And the woman was like, well, they were arguing over this one woman was not understanding. The argument was between, does a man, at this point in the conversation, they were arguing, does a man see a woman who is already previously married and has a young child, and maybe she's 28 and they're divorced, does a new prospective man see the one who is previously married as more valuable and has more potential than the one who is not married? And they were bringing up a couple of similar scenarios, and they were basically trying to convince this woman, you know, that the one who was previously married, even if she was divorced, has more rights, let's say, in the courts, for one, because if she was, they say got the ring, right? If she has the ring, which is synonymous with if she was married, right? To me, I don't take, because people stay engaged for forever these days, and then they'll call off an engagement, so I don't consider got the ring synonymous with marriage.
Yeah, no, but that's what they were using.
But that's what they were referring
yeah.
to.
Yeah.
But I think it's a distinction that needs to be made also, that getting the ring doesn't mean you've sealed the deal. You've actually got to get married. And her argument was, well, what if that woman is now 30 and she has a young kid and she's been focusing on raising that child, and she's just heartbroken, and so she hasn't been in the dating atmosphere for a while, and that comes up, right? You know, where someone has been jaded, and you know, that song is emphasizing that. You know, I thought that I wouldn't find someone, and I think actually listening to people really studying how to have a good relationship rather than having a good divorce will help to set you up for even hopefully to not be heartbroken like that, because that is, I can understand how that's devastating and would seemingly set you behind. Anyway, so that song reminded me of that.
Yeah, and each, you know, most opinions are not valid. They're not for the broader audience, right? Most opinions are only valid to the person that has it, as long as whatever they're opinionated on is working for them. And so if we're listening to some things sometimes, and you know, people are most of the time arguing from their perspective, which is what we're doing here. We're talking about ourselves from our perspective, saying this has worked for us, and we don't have enough time in an hour podcast or 2-hour podcast or a 14-hour podcast to talk about our entire life being together as long as we have. You can't describe everything. We can only describe, you know, the concepts and the context and different things like that, not so much content, right? And so when you're listening to people, most people aren't actually giving a valid description or having a valid discussion. They're arguing a point based upon their own life. And you can hear people, you know, you use that woman, I could hear that she was arguing from a position where she is a little bit older, she's not married, and she's like, well, what do you got to get married for? What do you got, you know? And obviously not happy, because everything was relatively negative that she was bringing up. And, you know, so you're not gonna win with you're not gonna shift their thoughts, because in order to accept your thoughts, they have to be wrong. In their mind, they're going to have to be wrong, and it's going to invalidate their life, the way they're living, the choices they've made, that kind of stuff. So that's why I hope we reach some younger people, you know, so that aren't jaded, that aren't, you know, 35, 40, 50 years old. You know, that it's great if older people want to listen to us, but you know, I want younger people to know that you can have an exciting, fun life, and it can be with one person, and you can be married for a long time. You know, it's going to be work, and usually men a little bit older with women a little bit younger than them. You know, we're 12 years apart. We met when I was 30 and you're 19, and you know, 18, but we got married then when you were 19, and you know, it's like that worked really well. I was more immature, you were more mature. You know, I had established a lot of things in life. I was very accomplished at a lot of things, but I was still pretty mature. And I needed somebody who complimented me, you know, in many different ways, like you did, you know. And we had struggles, but they were positive, moving forward struggles. We weren't tearing each other down and fighting and physically getting into it and that kind of stuff. We were discussing things, and we were helping each other. You know, I helped you through some family issues, and you know, you helped me with cleaning the house and
right, picking up socks, finding the socks.
No, but we're complementary to each other in many ways. And so, you know, it's very possible and it's a very wonderful thing when you get farther into your relationship, knowing someone, like that song says, knowing somebody and then finding out things you didn't know is exciting, and
that helps when you're 12 years apart, because you were 12 when I was an infant. You were living through things that like, oh wow, is that what it was like back then? In the 70s, everything was green and brown and yellow.
Dinosaurs were still roaming the earth.
Oh my gosh, in the 80s, you actually had Zubas and wore all these hot colors.
Breakdancing and big hair bands and rap and
I think it does actually help.
Everything was new and fresh.
To have different experiences like that to share, not just experience based upon experience in life, but because you actually grew up in a different era.
Right.
And as you were talking about that, I was thinking, I think it actually helped for me. I had a fair amount of experience even when we met. I had different experiences that not most kids, and I was a kid at that age, I'd lived abroad for a year, made it happen, earning a scholarship and earning the extra money to be able to do that, had worked several jobs while going to school, just had a number of experiences that already made me feel quite confident in myself, and I think it, especially at that point on, would have taken an older man for me to even just kind of tame down my own haughtiness and just be like, yeah, he's lived longer than I have, and he probably does know a few. Because even still,
you're a little bossy pants, yeah. You were cute though.
I know you liked my bossy pants for a while.
Yeah, I liked it when you tried to push me around a little bit, verbally, emotionally. There was a fun interplay between us. There were times when I put my foot down, there was times when you put your foot down, and we found a balance with each other.
But you were old enough also to know how to deal with it, because I think a certain personality of a younger man, maybe more my age, well, maybe not quite even my age, but might have not had enough experience to really know how to deal with that. And it might have been just more like clashing.
Headbutting, yeah.
Where you were, had been in life a little bit longer. It's like, okay, that's cute, all right, this is how we're gonna handle this, kind of thing. And so I think that's a huge advantage.
Well, you were just so people know, you're a linguist, so you were translating. You speak multiple languages and you write them and you understand them, and that's a big thing. Knowing a language and writing a language are two different things. And so, you were accomplished in areas like that, but then you had, your job, you did have a translating job, but you also had kind of regular jobs, and I was already a professional tool maker and I was a professional martial arts instructor. And so, I was at a different level in work. I had careers and you had jobs.
Yep.
And so when you would say, I was working too, it was cute, I was like, oh yeah, you were, and so, I wasn't belittling you at all. I was just saying, we've got to talk, and that's the number one thing, is first on our marital arts list is patience, and then second is communication. And you've got to be patient. And you have to be patient with yourself. All the feelings you feel. Oh, I gotta get it out. I gotta say it. I gotta defend my position. You gotta have patience with yourself first. Then you can have patience with other people, and then you can communicate properly. And patience doesn't mean just sitting there quiet for a half hour while somebody rants and raves and does all their stuff, right? Patience is, okay, all right, now I'm gonna say something, and burp, you inject yourself and you say, all right, we need to talk about that because you said a lot of points, you made a lot of determinations, and you're already getting down the road past where we were talking about. And so we both got to feel good about it and work together. So
right. I thought I was talking earlier about, the era that I was brought up in, and the coaching from my parents, preparation, and I do think that there's really sound reasoning behind teaching a girl, in particular, realistically any child, but there's focus put on it for girls. You need to have a certain level of skill, be able to support yourself, and not just what would have been in your parents' era, which is here's how you take care of a household, here's how you be a wife and a mom. So there's really a lot more put on young women, and I don't think we have time to actually get into the topic now, but this is a good prelude.
We got about 15 minutes left.
This is a good setup. So I think the next time we'll talk about being between a rock and a hard place. And what I had in mind in bringing up that topic and having each of us talk about why we think young men and women are and were. For me, I even felt it 20 years ago, even though I married you very early. Very early in my life, by modern standards.
Yeah, late compared to some of those 12, 13, 14-year-olds.
Yeah, 100 years ago. Yeah. And so I think it's a good setup, as far as where I'm going with it, being between a rock and a hard place for young women is you're supposed to accomplish, first of all, an education, an advanced education, a job, a man, and children.
Okay, let's not get into it now, because I'm going to disagree with all of it.
Well,
and
we
don't have time.
I'm setting it up for next time.
Yeah.
And because
the reason being...
Hang on just a second. The reason I want us to talk about it is because we're not in it.
Right.
We're not in that phase. And so while we might get passionate about it...
We're not in that society.
We're not in that phase, not the society necessarily.
We don't live that way.
Although I was in that generation.
You were raised that way.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we have not only a different viewpoint, but even though when we get passionate about it, it's not personal anymore.
Well, stay tuned, like and subscribe, John and Tara Podcast on YouTube, because if we talk about this is going to be good. My parents never once asked me which college I was going to go to or what I wanted to do when I grow up. They never asked me once. Mm-hmm. That's huge. There was no pressure. There was that societal mentality was not in my household growing up. So I think that's going to be, because I think one of the most detrimental things you can do to a child is try to focus them on their future.
Oh, they're just totally not prepared. I mean, I felt I was regularly called way mature for whatever age I was at. I was always more mature. But I was still not, I couldn't see into the future and what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. But what I did is when I met you, I did make a huge decision. I decided to be with you. I wanted my future to be with you. And I would let the career, that life path sort itself out. And that was a huge fork in the road for me. I mean, you said, I'll move to your college, town, whatever, I can start up a martial arts school. But for me, it was a decision either or. Yeah. And so my life could have very easily been this toss-up between, well, it already was, but you have to make a decision. I had the opportunity to be with you, and that's the decision I made at that point. And that the rest would sort itself out.
You should write that down, because that is huge. When a gal decides that she has an opportunity to be with a man, that's huge. That's what all these people are talking about. They're talking about the value of men, the value of women, and you innately had that feeling inside of you that there was value in being with this guy. Now, I'm not bolstering myself going, well, yeah, of course you should have valued me. No, that was in you. That was innately in you. And I obviously wanted to be married. That's in me, that I want to have that type of relationship. I want to have that level of commitment, that level of depth, that knowing somebody for a large portion of my life the same person, you know. And for you to say that was an opportunity for you to be with me, you know, because it happened to be me, or a man of my position, or whatever you saw in me, that's huge. And those are the little things that women need to listen. That's female intuition. That's what women need to listen to. Stop listening to their aunts and uncles. I'm not saying don't listen to your parents. I'm just saying you don't have to be pushed down the road. It's okay to have common sense, have some wisdom at your level, let your life move in the direction it's moving. You know, if the wind is blowing and your sailboat is not in the water, you're not going anywhere. You know, you put your sailboat in the water, you put up your sail, the wind blows, and then you can start to navigate. And that's the common sense and the wisdom I'm talking about. You may not know where the fish are if you're fishing. You may not know exactly where you're going if you're going across a sea. You might have a map, but you don't know the treacherous parts. You don't know the hazards. You don't know, you know, you're going to try and get in the trade winds and be in the flow and all this stuff. But you got to be in the water. Your boat has to be in the water. The sail has to be up. And, you know, and most of these people talking about statistics and percentages and all this stuff, they're not even in the water. They're just talking about the wind blowing. Yeah, if you were in the water now, your boat would be going really fast in that direction, you know. And it's like, okay, good. Why am I talking?
And this boat might have to stop off at this island every once in a while.
You know, it's
Pleasure Island.
Pleasure. Welcome to Fantasy Island.
Oh, is it fantasy?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. Mine's Pleasure Island.
Yeah, I guess. Jeez. Now you know what I gotta work with. I gotta work on what I gotta do. Jeez.
Oh, poor you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good segue into perhaps a very different but complementary part two.
Yeah. Well, maybe what we should do is review one of these podcasts. They're all kind of blending. They're all kind of the same. I don't want to sensationalize anything, and I don't think that I don't think young people need to be listening to it. You know, I've listened to quite a few of them because...
John, why don't you say a few more things to promote our podcast? All of them are the same, and young people don't need to listen to it?
I'm not talking about ours. I'm talking about those.
Those,
yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, I've listened to quite a few. I don't think young people need to listen to them.
Okay.
I think that you need to, if you're a young person, you need, you know, when I say young, I'm talking, you know, 20 and below. So as soon as you're 16 years old, get a job. Get out and get a job, because that's going to teach you about people, about work, about things you don't want to do for the rest of your life, and have multiple jobs. Don't work at McDonald's for 5 years. You know, unless you're going to become an owner and buy a franchise and that kind of stuff. But you should work at the grocery store, the gas station, the local factory as a temp worker for the summer or something like that. You know, a restaurant, not just a Burger King or a McDonald's, a restaurant, you know, where there's sit down time and people bring their families in. I know that sounds like McDonald's to some people, but
you know, you'll learn different roles as well.
Where a waiter works,
yeah.
You know, a higher end restaurant where you have to wait tables and that kind of stuff. And don't stay there for 4 years, you know, work there for a year, 2 years, and a year and a half, and get out and do something else. That is
or change positions, you know, go from dishwasher to prep cook or to host.
Right, yeah, try and climb the ladder a little bit and then get out. That's what I did. I think it's the reason why there's so much divorce is because people they're in school all the way up until college. They never really have jobs. And then they get out into the workforce. Maybe they marry their college sweetheart or, you know, somebody like that. And then they're out in the world, and then the world just crashes in on you. And it's like, holy cow, there is no, you know, you're paying for your housing. It's not dorm rooms. Your school lunches plan is taken care of. Now you got to cook every day, 3 times a day, you know, or 2 if you eat bigger meals, whatever your thing is, if you're a bodybuilder, 5 times a day, whatever it is, but you got to take care of yourself, you got to do your own stuff and accommodate yourself for everything. And life is pressure. Life is difficult. You can either get squished or you can become a diamond. There's pressure, and you got to decide which end of the spectrum you're going to be on. And so, yeah, that's it. John and Tara podcast on YouTube. Jon and Tara, Tara. That's you.
That's me. Yeah.
All right.
Well, good. Yeah, I'm glad in the end you're promoting our podcast.
I was promoting it. I'm not even saying don't watch other people's podcasts. I'm just saying.
Well, it's kind of like
don't get caught up in the statistics. Don't be a statistic.
And choose. It's like your end monologue about getting different jobs and experiences. It's the same principle. Get some variety out there. You don't go into. And most of all, listen to the people who have what you. I mean, now you have to judge from the outside. You don't know truly what's going on all on the inside, but listen more to the people who are doing and are where you want to be.
Yeah, and it's not all about money. You don't go into marriage with risk management thought process. You go into marriage with wide-eyed optimism and hoping for the best and working on the rest. You really got to work on it.
Absolutely.
You got to be active. It's just like anything else. If you were playing a round of golf, if you were playing basketball, you have to be active. You can't just stand there and let the game happen around you. You
might have to take a different course, get a different coach, and sometimes you just need to take a break. I'm not.
Pleasure Island.
I'm not condoning that. That's not what I'm saying.
That's great.
We might as well end on that.
All right, there we go.
All right.
Later.